Welcome in. I'm Rachel Baribeau. He is Josh Booty. It is another edition of Booty and Baribeau, and we are so excited to be with you. We were just talking, Josh and I, before we started this video podcast on Gridiron Now, and we were talking about how quickly the college football season is going by. Snap, and it'll be over with. Josh, pretty awesome game so far. Some unexpected things have happened, some upsets. And it just goes to show that as much as we think we know about a team, a player, we really don't know anything at all.
That's true. We've had 3 great weeks. It's week 4 already. I can't believe we're a month into the season. We've had some amazing games, some amazing upsets, some great victories by some of these teams. I think as we look into going into week 4, you got to say Ole Miss has the best victory out of anyone that's, in the SEC. Ole Miss went to Alabama, Bryant-Denny Stadium, and won the game with really a new quarterback for them, a guy that didn't play last year for them, has started 2 games before, and to win on the road is just huge, especially in the SEC West when you've got all those great teams. So it's just been a fun start of the season. We've got teams that hadn't played up to their capabilities. We got a South Carolina team that's down compared to most. We've got a Georgia team that looks really good and balanced. We've got an Arkansas team who plays A&M in Arlington this week, and no one would have thought they would be 1-2 going into Game 4 or Week 4. So it's been an exciting first month of the season, and this week we've got some great matchups too.
Josh, let's talk about some of the things that have happened before we move on. Yesterday, I think the internet almost broke, and I like to say the internet's almost broke and turned on its head with rumors that out of Tuscaloosa. And I don't want to go into the rumors per se, but I do want to say this. There are question marks about their offense on Saturday, and certainly with their quarterbacks and the decision to start Cooper Bateman over Jacob Coker. And listen, Nick Saban is one of the first to talk about, we've got to play our brand of football. We've got to play Alabama football, and the turnovers certainly attributed to that. And even there was a long touchdown pass with Chad Kelly, which, was in contention, and turns out there were some offensive linemen downfield, ineligible, shouldn't have been downfield. And so you look at that game and you look at what's been happening in Tuscaloosa this week. And again, we're not going to address the rumors head on because they're just that, rumors. But certainly you kind of wonder how this will all shake out for the game on Saturday.
Definitely. Lane Kiffin, he's had a tough week, to say the least. And then now some of the things that are being thrown around, it's a very tough week for him. Now the transition is, hey, we've got a game Saturday. We've got to collect ourselves from last week's debacle. 5 turnovers. 3 were really his fault. 3 were the offense's fault. And that that's on the quarterbacks, that's on the receivers, that's on Lane Kiffin and the offense. But they had 2 turnovers on kick returns, which are I'm sure drove Saban crazy. But yes, it is a big week for Kiffin to try to get away from all the rumors, get back to playing football. Saban, we talked about it last week a lot. Saban wants to run the football and stay balanced, and they just didn't do a good job of handling the football and protecting it last week, and and they took the loss, and so now they've got to go back to the drawing board and really get after, I think, the offensive game plan to run the football and get back to themselves. And I really thought that's where they were. And then last week we saw them throw, 40, 50 times in the game. And that's not really what Bama wants to do.
Speaking of another team that, it's not necessarily what they want to do. That's Arkansas a couple of weeks ago against Toledo. Not what they wanted to do in terms of throwing the ball more than they ran the ball. And they've got a matchup against A&M. And Texas A&M, I'm a big fan of John Chavis. I'm a big fan of the Chief. I know what he's done at Tennessee. I know what he's done at LSU. I know you know him as well. One of the best defensive coordinators, in my opinion, up there with Bud Foster in all of college football. I didn't think he would turn around that defense as quickly as he did. And we know what Kevin Sumlin does on the offensive side of the ball. So, you look at the Arkansas offensive line, hasn't given up a sack versus a team that's gotten a lot of sacks. Something has to give.
Chavis, I saw him talking a couple times this week on some of the interviews and stuff, and he really likes his players. And I didn't know if he would go into a situation where it was a cupboard full of great players, or he would go into a situation where he'd really have to recruit and rebuild or build a team and recruit guys that he wanted to be a part of his defense. And so for him to step into that position as defensive coordinator of the Aggies and to have those types of players that he already really has fallen in love with is a huge plus for him. And now now he's reaping the benefits, and the team and the college is really, the university's reaping the benefits of what John Chavis is doing with that talent that's on the field. I mean, he does have two sack masters there on defense, and he says he's got a great secondary, and he's got great linebackers. So, A&M just needed a defensive coordinator to come in there and control what they were doing defensively. We all know that A&M scores a lot of points, and you mentioned it. Someone is a high-flying offense, but now to have that defense playing the type of football they're playing, A&M is a real force to reckon with.
Everybody's talking about outside of the SEC, Josh, and they're doing it like giddy. I mean, they're crazy. They're like, oh, the SEC overrated, particularly the SEC West. I don't know that I would say that necessarily. I would say there's been some surprise teams. I would say Ole Miss. I would say LSU. I would say Texas A&M are three teams that I didn't know prior to the season that would show as well as they have so far. Now, listen, it's week 4. There's a lot of football to be played. But certainly they've impressed me, those three teams. So listen, if you're outside the SEC and there's an SEC fatigue, it's real. People hate the SEC for the many, many years they were on top. But I just say it's the teams maybe we didn't expect.
Yeah, there is a lot of parity, but there's a lot of good teams, especially on the West right now, because we've seen A&M go and beat Arizona State. We've seen LSU just crush Auburn last week, and so those are and Ole Miss win at Bama. So to have those three teams winning the way they've won and really dominating the teams that they've played thus far, we're seeing three teams that we didn't know were going to be that strong, and I think you hit the nail on the head. Now it's they get into the conference play, staying healthy is huge for these teams, but LSU's playing great defense with a new coordinator, Kevin Steele. A&M's playing great defense with the new coordinator in John Chavis. So that's really mixing up what's happening in the SEC.
All right, I've got to ask you this. You being a former quarterback, the old adage is defense wins championships. Is that still the adage? And do you have to have an offense that can hang tight, that can score points as well? Because I've heard different people. Barry Switzer said it. That's still the adage. The other day, I heard him on Sirius XM, where I host Sirius XM College Sports Nation. But then I've heard some other people say it is more predicated on the offense. I know we're playing offensive football these days, but the SEC is rooted in, grounded, and historically known as a defensive-minded league with really hogs, with big guys along that line of scrimmage that can dominate that line of scrimmage.
You're exactly right. I think the types of players that come from the South in general, you've got great speed, you've got the big dudes up front. A lot of these teams, they can rotate on the defensive line. I think that's where really it all starts, is the defensive line. If you got 4 guys that can rush the passer, and then if they get tired, you can bring another 4 in and they can rush the passer. So those teams that are real deep on the defensive line, they're the teams that win championships. If you look at Ohio State last year, they're strong on the defensive front. They wanted the line of scrimmage on defense. And we all talk about the flash, and we all love the glitz and glamour and the Oregon offenses and the high flying offenses. But at the end of the day, I think it really does come down to, you have to have both. You have to score points. I think like Florida right now, they're in our conference. They're having a great season. They're 3-0. They host Tennessee. They've won 10 games in a row against Tennessee, but I don't think their offense is where their defense is at right now. So I don't think they can win a championship. It would be an amazing year if Florida was able to get to the SEC championship and win an SEC championship, because they don't score a lot of points. I think they have got to build an offense there, and that's what McElwain's trying to do. He's an offensive guy. Florida has always been known for its offense back since the 70s, 80s with Spurrier and what they do. So I think, in the SEC, you're going to have great defenses across the board, but it all comes down to those defensive fronts. But again, you do have to have some type of offense to be able to win the league. It's just so tough.
Speaking of defenses, we talked about the East. I've got to ask you about Steve Spurrier. It's a sad state of affairs, Josh. He is the evil genius, the old ball coach, the head ball coach, whatever you want to call him. But he's not experiencing good times right now, nor did he last year. And I think he just did a radio show this week in which his defensive coordinator, Lorenzo Ward, talked about moving one of his linebackers. And he literally said, "That's news to me. on the radio show. Okay, that's not good when that kind of miscommunication comes out in public.
Yeah, he's not used to those things happening. Right now, things are snowballing in a negative way for that program, and I hate it because Spurrier's been such a force to be reckoned with for so long. And so for them to get dominated, for him to start I think he's starting a freshman this week for the first time since I think he started Jesse Palmer back in the late '90s, early 2000s. But so he's not used to playing with a deck that's short, and right now his deck is short. They're having to bring guys and play in different positions that aren't used to doing that, and that's his comment was like, what else is new now? I mean, they're trying anything they can do to try to stay on the football field with anybody right now, and they're having a tough time doing it.
Josh, I'll say this about Coach Spurrier. Oftentimes we are we're so caught up in wins and losses that we forget to kind of look at the bigger picture. And, I think about it the same when it comes to Frank Beamer, when it came to Bobby Bowden, when it comes to Steve Spurrier. Fans want what they want, and they want to win. But I think they also have to be realistic. But more than that, I wish that for a moment we'd step back and kind of look at the total picture and remember him for who he is. I mean, he can't coach in the future based on his past and what he's done in the past, but he's also an institution when it comes to college football, particularly in the SEC.
He is college football to me.
Yeah.
He's done so much for college football. He's a Heisman Trophy winner. The guy, I think the guy's still got a lot of good coaching left. I think that he's gotten away from recruiting a little bit because that's his personality. He likes to kick back and do some other things.
Like golf?
Yeah. We've mentioned that before. And be himself and do some things that he wants to do. But he's really got to shift his focus to recruiting. And, the state of South Carolina is rich in talent, just like every state is in the South and in the Southeastern Conference. And so he's got to really reach back and start to grab all those players in South Carolina to try to get it back and right the ship. But it just looks like the cupboard's a little empty for him, and they're getting tossed around on both sides of the ball, and that's not a good recipe for success.
You mentioned that Florida-Tennessee game. Big game for both programs. I think the onus is more on Tennessee. And why I think that is because Butch Jones was so heralded going into the season. Tennessee, in the spring, Josh, everybody was picking Tennessee. They were the it team. And then through camp and whatnot, they had some attrition along their lines of scrimmage. And people started to come off of them and say, wait one more year, maybe one more year. And then I think the Oklahoma game, the ability to let that lead slip away, not be able to close, had a lot of people questioning Butch Jones. I think, if anything, it's on him to be able to go to the Swamp, close, get a big victory over a big rival, and really a signature win, if you will.
He needs it. The program needs it. Florida's won 10 in a row. Butch Jones needs a win. He needs to close one out. He had Oklahoma on the road. We saw that game. What an epic matchup that was. And Baker Mayfield and Oklahoma played great in the second half. But Tennessee had that game won, and it looked like they just kind of got conservative and shut things down. And then Oklahoma started gaining momentum. But Tennessee's a good football team. I don't know if they're a great football team yet, but they do need a signature win, and Butch needs a signature win. And for him, they're favored on the road at Florida. Can you believe it?
Yeah.
I think it's favored by 1.5 points on the road, and they hadn't won there in 20 years. So it's going to be a big time environment. It's almost like back to the good old days where Spurrier was at Florida. It's like the Swamp is getting loud again. It's going to be fun to watch Tennessee try to go into the Swamp and beat Florida, and Florida's undefeated. So this is really a good matchup this week. I can't wait to watch it.
That's another big matchup this weekend within the conference. But I think the one that everybody's going to be watching for a lot of different reasons. Some cheering against, some cheering for, some watching like this between their fingers, Josh, and that's a Mississippi State Auburn game right there on the Plains. We have discussed Jeremy Johnson's struggles. He's out. Sean White is in. And one of my old professors, John Caravallo, he tweeted during the Memphis-Cincinnati game last night. He said, "Take heart, Auburn fans. This guy's a freshman." Speaking of Sean White and that he would be able to come in and commandeer this offense. This game historically between these two teams has been a heavyweight battle, has gone down to the end, has been a grudge match, and has been very, very physical. Do you expect anything different tomorrow?
I don't think the teams are quite as good as they've been in the last few seasons. I think we've got a Mississippi State team that lost a lot last year. Auburn lost a lot last year. When you look at the quarterback position, they had to make a change. Sean White is definitely a guy that needs to be taking the snaps behind center. I think it gives them a new life. Auburn's loss now against LSU last week was huge. They didn't play well against Jacksonville State. It was definitely a time for them to go to the next guy, and so they pulled the trigger. I'm so happy they did it, and I think Sean White's going to give them a little bit of a new life. If they can come out and score some points offensively, watch Muschamp and the things start to domino in football. If it's like last week in that Alabama game. Ole Miss was up a few scores. They got a couple of lucky plays, lucky bounce, and they got up, and then Alabama started to score, and then they stopped them and scored again, and it got to be such a tight ball game when we thought Alabama was out of it. Well, that's the same thing that can happen with any of these football teams. If Auburn can get some momentum going on offense, if Sean White leads them down the field, say in the first drive, and then comes back and has a good second drive, it's like the defense, what they do, they wake up. The coaches wake up. They're like, we got something here. We got something here, because they weren't moving the ball on offense, and it was a disgusting looking version of anything Gus Malzahn's ever been able to do offensively. People were wondering, is Gus Malzahn really a good coach or not? I mean, of course he's a good coach. He's won some amazing games in an amazing fashion. He took them to the national championship a few years ago. So it's fun to watch these fans get up and down and go up and down like a roller coaster on whether they like their coaches or what's going on. It just takes one player to get in there, them to make a couple plays, and then the thing heats back up. So if Sean White can do it, then it's going to be fun to see what Auburn has. If Sean White doesn't play well, Mississippi State's going to beat him because Prescott's such a good quarterback.
He is, and he's progressed, in my opinion. Caleb Presley, he played at UNC, and he's got this whole line of shirts that kind of thumbs a nose at the NCAA. And I'm actually going to order you one, Josh. I've got one from each school. But Dak's shirt, it's got a picture of Dak, and it says Dak the Ripper, right? And so I love it. And I'm actually going to order one. But all the proceeds, it's kind of cool, all the proceeds thumbing the nose at the NCAA go to the player. So if a shirt is purchased at whatever school it may be, it goes to that player. But you're right, they're going to have to face a guy who has matured, who came back, getting his master's, has a great relationship with Mullen. It's symbiotic. They understand each other. And Dak's mom, before she passed away, Peggy, kind of left him in the hands of Dan Mullen. And so it's been really neat to watch him progress. And, Dan Mullen was on Sirius XM this week, and he talked about the fact that both teams have lost an SEC game. So both teams are really needing this game to get back up and kind of salvage their season within the conference.
Yeah, you're right. Dak Prescott is a winner. We all know he can play. He doesn't have the team around him that he had last year, so he's having to work extra hard.
Yeah.
He's having to lead extra hard. He's having to do some things that he's never had to do before, and he's responded well. Their game against LSU came down to the final possession. So I mean, they could easily be undefeated going into this game, and we'd be talking about it as one of the big games in the conference this week. But you're right, Auburn needs a win really badly. They need to play well badly. Mississippi State needs a win. I think Auburn just needs to play well. They're in a bad state right now, and with the quarterback switch and everything that's going on, and Muschamp being the new defensive coordinator, they need something to happen for them. And if Auburn wins this game, then they could get back on track a little bit, and that'd help that program.
We had one of our contributors here, John Kublick, younger brother of offensive lineman Cole Kublick, played at Auburn as well. He wrote a piece on Gridiron Now about what it felt like as an athlete to be booed. What does it feel like, Josh, for your own team? I mean, because every athlete's had highs and every athlete has had lows. You're never always on the top and you're never always on the bottom. So what does it feel like to be booed by your own team?
I grew up as a Saints fan being in Louisiana, and everybody came to the stadium, to the Superdome with sacks over their heads. I mean, I know
the
you've
Aints.
probably seen those pictures, but yeah, the Aints, they'd have the sacks over their heads. They didn't even want to show themselves at the stadium, but they had to come watch football. And it's part of the game. I mean, you go through highs and lows. That's actually a fun part of the game, because if you let it motivate you, you know what, it can piss you off sometimes. It's like, that's why I was I was watching that Jeremy Johnson thing close in Auburn, because you would think stand up and go, you know what, by God, I'm going to take the bulls by the horns, and I'm going to go and do everything I can. I'm going to Tebow this thing to a victory
Yeah.
and just will it to happen. And he didn't do it. And I don't know if he got so far in the tank, or he just, he can't make a read, or he lost confidence or something, and they made that move. But, as a quarterback, you do deal with those types of things. I mean, even at the NFL level at the top, I mean, the Saints this year, Drew Brees, one of the greats of all time, and they're undefeated, and now talking about him, maybe he's not a right fit for New Orleans anymore. So, I mean, it's just the cycle of life and the way that things happen, and you just got to persevere and play your tail off, and when you get a chance, do all you can with it, not listen to the crowd.
Josh, I've got to ask you, I'm writing a piece for Good Iron now about the injuries that we're seeing this year in college football. And the first couple of weeks, it was, I talked to a lot of people, and they said, well, it's just because it's named, players. It's just because it's quarterbacks. It's just because it's, very popular players or highly rated players. But we're seeing it left and right. And I had a chance to visit with some former coaches, Jackie Sherrill and Jim Donnan, as well as Butch Davis. And they kind of talked to me, and I don't want to give it all away, but a little tease. They talked to me about what some of the things that were done maybe in your day, and the way you prepared for the season, and the amount of time that coaches had with you versus what's happening now. And maybe that's just one part of it. But have you ever seen anything like what we're seeing this year in terms of the injuries?
No, it's such a vicious game. I mean, even we'll go back to the NFL. They're having to make so many rule changes because of the violence of the sport. I mean, these guys are so big, so fast, so physical, especially at the NFL level. It's scary. If you ever get down on the field, which I know you do, you always got that sideline pass. But if you ever get down on that field and you watch, it's like this is moving at a different speed. It's almost like going to the Indianapolis 500 or a NASCAR event. Like, you watch it on TV and it looks like the cars are going 60 miles an hour, and then you go to an event and you get down there on the rail and it's like, holy, they're making that 2-mile lap, and it seems like they just blew by you. And so, down on the field, it's such a vicious, fast sport that, gear's getting better. The helmets are getting better. They're doing a lot of things to help, but it's such a vicious sport. And now with the way that I think defenses can blitz and work their coverages, and I just think it's, for a quarterback, I know there's just so much going on in the course of a game that it's dangerous. Like, you really have to know what you're doing. If you're under center and don't have a clue, really have a clue where everybody's supposed to be on the field and your protections, you're going to get blasted. And I think that's the biggest thing for a player nowadays, and for a high school quarterback or a quarterback coming up. I'd say, hey, buddy, if you're going to play this position, you got to be the smartest guy on the field and know where everybody's at, because it's such a dangerous game.
All right, Josh. Final thoughts, keys to the game, player you're watching this weekend. What is it for you? What's got you interested this weekend?
We hadn't talked about it, but I like the Missouri at Kentucky. That game is one where you've got a quarterback at Missouri, Matty Mock, who is he's won more SEC games than anybody that's in the league right now, and he's going to Kentucky. And Kentucky with Bob Stoops, they're a much improved team.
Yes, they are.
I like what they're doing. They're playing some good defense. We're not used to Kentucky playing great football, and they're actually playing good football. They hung in there last week with Florida. Could have gone either way, really. There was a tight game, and Missouri comes off a 3-point win versus Connecticut, and Missouri's been to 2 of the last 3 SEC championship games in Atlanta. So I think this is a big test for Missouri to try to stay on track, or to get going, because they've been known to win that East the last few years. And then for Kentucky to try to knock off a team that won their side of the conference last year is just such a big game. And I think if Kentucky can do it, then that state starts to have something to domino affect them a little bit, and then recruiting and the things that they want to do as a program. So I'm really watching that game.
Yeah, and I'm watching I'm watching all of them as you are, but the Florida-Tennessee game, I think it's Butch Jones' time. I think it's Joshua Dobbs' time. I think it's this time to take this team to the next level, to come back to where they rightfully deserve to be, and that's at the top of the East. But hey, we haven't even talked about Georgia, and we'll do that on Monday. But Georgia turning into an awfully dominant, complete team, a very scary team, Josh.
Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna be like Corso, not so fast. I think that Florida defense is a game changer. It's going to be hard for Tennessee. to move the football. It's going to come down to a field goal, but it's going to be such a low scoring affair. I don't think either team is really good on offense, but Florida's got such a good defensive unit, and it's in the swamp. It's going to be hard to beat them. It's going to be fun.
All right, Josh, enjoy your weekend of football. We will be back at it early next week to talk about the games and get you ready for the week to come. Have a wonderful weekend, guys.
See you guys.
Bye.